Welcome to a new video. Let's take a look at some new malicious compliance stories. The first story is called "Can't Work More Than 20 Hours?" This happened a few months ago. I used to work as a front desk assistant at one of my university's student housing. Our main duty was to check the ID of every student that enters the building, to make sure they actually live there. It also involved making temporary cards for those who locked themselves out and call the appropriate authorities in case someone passes out or the fire alarm rings. We had to work under a graduate community assistant who used to schedule us and approve our timesheets. The university policy regarding student employment was that students weren't allowed to work for more than 20 hours. Under certain conditions, the students could make it up to 25 hours. But the supervisor had to approve the timesheet. The supervisor used to change every few years. Whenever the current supervisor graduates, a new graduate student would replace him or her. During my junior year, a new supervisor was appointed in our building. Let's call her Ellen. Ellen always used to try to boss over student employees. Everybody hated her for doing this. After a few months of working as a front desk worker, I got an offer from one of the reputed companies in my field for the next term and summer. I emailed Ellen the same day I got my offer letter, to inform her that I won't be able to work next term. The next day I met her at work. She came over to my desk and asked whether it was paid or unpaid. It was paid, and the pay was also $8 more than her hourly pay. I subtly disclosed that, as she always used to be bossy over us. As you can expect, she started to try to make my life a living hell for the rest of the term. I worked in the building for 2.5 years and I knew all the residents on a first-name basis, so I never had to check their ID card. But she made me check the card of every individual passing through the gate. Now comes the best part. The girl who was supposed to work after me always used to come late, so I had to stay at the desk until she came. If she was late for more than 15 minutes, I would put that half hour under my name. I was getting paid for that, so I didn't make a big deal out of it. Because of situations like these, we were only allowed to schedule for 20 hours, but we could work for 25 hours. At one time she didn't show up for her shift at all. So I stayed throughout her shift. This caused my total hours to reach above 20. On the day of approving the timesheet, Ellen called me to her office and asked me why my hours exceeded 20. I explained what happened. Then she started saying I wasn't allowed to work more than 20 and she can't approve my 2 hours over 20. Apparently, I had to email her a day prior to working someone else's shift and it had to be approved. And this is where the malicious compliance started. The front desk assistant was the first emergency responder. So it was emphasized in our training that the desk should never be left vacant. That was the reason I continued to work even after someone didn't show up. After that day, if the person that worked after me was more than 5 minutes late, I would call Ellen to look after the desk. She really wasn't happy about it, but that was the rule. She also couldn't fire anyone, as hiring another student worker and training them in the middle of a term would be troublesome. After a few times, Ellen stopped picking up my calls. I would wait until I make enough hours to make 20 that week and I would leave if no replacement was there by that time. One day after I finished my shift and left, someone burned their popcorn in the microwave, and it triggered the fire alarm. The residents noticed there was no one at the front desk and they themselves called 911 and proceeded to evacuate the building. After a few moments, a few police cars and 2 fire trucks reached the building. All this was happening and Ellen had no idea about it. The area coordinator reached the scene and managed everything. The firemen found the source and everything was cleared. The next day, I got an email from our area coordinator to meet him, as I was the last person on the desk. As I went into the office, I was greeted by the area coordinator, along with Ellen and another guy who seemed important. They started by saying how irresponsibly I acted and that I will get fired for this and that disciplinary charges might follow. Then I began to explain everything to them. I started from that unapproved 2 hours and went along with how Ellen said to me I wasn't allowed to work for more than 20 hours. I even told them I called both my coworker and Ellen, but no one picked up the phone. I stayed 45 minutes after my shift ended, and as I wasn't allowed to work more than that, I just left. The room went silent, and Ellen turned red. They dismissed me and told me I will get an email regarding the decision. Later that day, the area coordinator apologized for the misunderstanding over email and asked me if I would take my job back, but I declined. I was starting the new job with better payment a few months later, so I decided to take my time off. Later I heard from my friends who were still working there that both Ellen and the coworker that didn't show up were fired, and no one is scheduled for 28 hours and the area coordinator had to cover that. I genuinely feel bad for the guy. The next story is called "Celebrity Bugaboo." Many years ago, I worked closely with a celebrity on his TV show. It was a first season show and no one knew who he was when we shot it. But by the time Season 1 had finished airing, he was on his way to fame and stardom. And by Season 2, he was making big bucks. I worked very closely with him and had a fairly significant job on his show. He could be difficult at times, but overall we got along well. And as we wrapped Season 2, I let him and the rest of the crew know some exciting news. My wife and I were having our first child. Now let's back up a moment. For those who haven't had a child themselves, there's this shopping period before the baby is born where you end up getting all the stuff you need. A crib, blankets, bottles, clothing and a stroller or two. And while there are plenty of strollers in the $100 to $300 range, at that moment in history the hottest, fanciest stroller was clearly the Bugaboo. This thing was high-tech design, super versatile, lightweight and comfortable for babies and parents alike. And it cost upwards of $800. So my wife and I marveled at it in the store. And then bought a $200 model. Because I'm neither rich nor stupid. With the stroller taken care of, we didn't bother adding another stroller to our registry. Which is why it was so surprising when a package was delivered to our home. We opened it up, and there was our very own Bugaboo. The iPhone of strollers. I'm telling you, this thing was amazing. We had to watch a video to really learn how to put it together. But it was so much better than our cheap stroller, and we were thrilled to have it. It was a gift from the celebrity. A very nice, and very surprising gift. Because as rich as he was also on the cheap side. I mean, even years later, he'd call everyone in for a production meeting, order pizzas for everyone, and collect cash from everyone there to split the cost. This is after he'd built his $10 million home. I'm not exaggerating. And that'd be the end of the story, except this is a malicious compliance story. So let's jump to the good part. As many celebrities do, this guy had a personal assistant. It makes sense, celebrities can be legitimately busy all the time. And they need someone trusted to help with the daily organization. Her name was Jennifer. Or maybe it wasn't. This Jennifer was great, very cool. And she was smart and great at her job. And eventually, she sold a project of her own and gave her notice. It was time for her to leave. By eventually, what I really mean is, right as Season 2 was wrapping up. And my wife and I were having our baby. And her celebrity boss told her to buy me the nicest stroller they make. He'd never had a kid, so he assumed it would be maybe $200. And on any other day, when she saw the $800+ price tag, she'd have wisely purchased a cheaper model for her cheaper boss. But she had nothing to lose. It was her last week of work and she had already sold the other project. So she obeyed his request to the last penny and bought us the nicest stroller you could get. He was mad when he found out, but by then I'd assembled it and thanked him. Well, he yelled at Jennifer a bit, but she didn't care. And of course, the celebrity never said a word to me. The damage was already done. That Bugaboo lasted for both my kids. And when our youngest had outgrown it, I made sure to extend the malicious compliance just a little bit further. I gave it to another former crew member who'd just had a baby of her own. Her name was also Jennifer. His one overpriced gift that he never wanted to buy has done triple duty so far. Maybe one day it'll go for 4. The last story is called, I Got Yelled At for Complying. I work for an auction website, a smaller company. I won't mention the name here. But it's an unspoken fact that this past year, our co-owners all made bad investments and we are both down in profit and also a little stretched for money in the company. Under normal circumstances, my status and title in the company is collection specialist. Basically, our department is in charge of taking payments from auction winnings, with some other work mixed in. As of mid-December, I am for all intents and purposes an assistant manager of the department. However, there's only 2 of us in the department. Back in December, our third member, who had seniority over me, was moved to the support department after a series of non-work related incidents that led to us losing like 3 members of the support team. That being said, the member who was moved and I are the only cross-trained members of the entire main office, meaning we can do multiple jobs throughout the company. We have one much larger office currently in construction, which is where the rest of our office-related jobs are located and where eventually, we'll all be moved to. A month and a half ago, one of our co-owners decided our 73-year-old receptionist needed to be at that location, to make sure nobody trespassed. This meant we needed someone to cover the front desk, and as I am the only consistently available person in the office and also one of the 2 cross-trained workers, that means I've been stuck at our front desk for a month and a half now. So, I've been covering the front desk and doing reception work, while doing my usual collections work as best I can. However, at the front desk, all other work takes precedence. This means if I get a phone call about something, I have to drop everything I am doing involving collections and answer the phone or take messages, etc. All the usual reception stuff. Technically I am working 2 jobs for the pay of 1, but there's nothing I can do about that. This morning, the moment the phone line opens up, I get a call from a very stressed out man. He explained that a bit before he'd called, he'd been rear-ended by a delivery truck from your company, and he wanted to talk to anyone in charge of our delivery trucks. To my knowledge, we only have 2 or 3 company vehicles. A large box truck and 1 or 2 small shipping vans. The box truck has our company name in a small logo, but the vans are completely wrapped in company information. I asked him if the vehicle he was hit by was small or large, and he specified small, with your company info all over it. That's how I knew who to call. So, that checks out, of course. He then informs me that when his truck was rear-ended, it pushed his vehicle into another person's car and he was sandwiched between the 2 vehicles. The woman in the other car involved thought she might be injured, so they called 911. He explained to me that an ambulance and secure law enforcement responded to the scene. After the ambulance checked out the woman and made sure she was okay, he claimed that the man in our company vehicle waited in silence outside of his vehicle. Then got in and drove away before the police could talk to him. This was very surprising to me, just in general. Nobody in our company has been involved in a vehicular accident in the 2 years I've worked here. Also, depending on where he was, he could have very easily been near one of our locations. The man didn't specify anything he knew about our company, so I did a quick check as he was explaining the situation, and he isn't one of our registered customers, whether by name nor by phone number. I wrote down some information and explained to him that I didn't know who was in charge of that. He clarified that the officer who had responded to the scene told him to call us, and that both he and the officer had looked us up to find this number. I asked him to hold on and then went to our human resource manager. The manager told me to have the man email Joe, who is in charge of our trucks. She also asked that I please add in our head of accounting, Jerry, as he handles the rare insurance claims and will want to be aware of the situation just in case something happens. That made complete sense to me, and I made sure to check with her on what to email them, as I've never talked to Joe before, or even met him due to him working from home. I then explained to the man that he needed to email Joe and explain the situation to him, and that I'd notify Joe ahead of time about the situation. Not once did I mention Jerry or that I'd be including him in my email as well. As I'm discussing this with the man, one of our co-owners came in and went back to my usual office to discuss things with my supervisor about some checks. The co-owner left to somewhere else in the building to talk to other office workers, and my supervisor came in to talk to me about what they'd discussed as I hung up with the man on the phone. I explained the accident to her, and she asked what I did about it. I told her, and she nodded and confirmed that she probably would have gone to the human resources manager as well, and that I did good. A few minutes later, she was back in our office and the co-owner asks what's going on. She explains to the co-owner what I'd told her, and I hear the co-owner yell, "What? I need to go ask her for information on this." And she approaches where I am. I give her the short of it. She asks what I did to handle it. I explained I asked around for who I should notify, and the co-owner explodes, screaming at me that I was wrong and how could I, and what was wrong with me that I'd give some random guy our insurance information and that she can't believe I'd do something like this. I actually did not give out our insurer informations, as only Jerry has that information. In response, a 4th coworker comes out of his office and very defensively stands about 5 feet from me with his arms crossed, glaring her down as she screams at me. Across the main office, I hear a 5th coworker say, "What is the co-owner yelling about?" as the co-owner continues to scream at me and even goes so far as to rip my paperwork from my hands and take it from me. She even yelled, "I'm not yelling at you. I am yelling my stream of thought." The co-owner then left, and my coworker continued staring her down defensively until she got in her car, then nodded at me and returned to his office. The co-owner proceeds to call my cell phone twice more in 10 minutes, yelling at me the first time for going behind her back and not going to a higher up. Which I did, and technically I'm only 2 levels below her herself and have seniority over most people in our other office and a couple in this one. She demands I forward her what I emailed Joe and Jerry. Jerry, in the meanwhile, can hear me on the phone with her and could hear her screaming at me, so emails back in the chain, "Thanks for including me, glad to know," in the most passive-aggressive move I have ever seen him do since I started working here. So I forward her the emails, including Jerry's thanking me for notifying him. Her second phone call was her yelling at me that the email made no sense to her and how dare I did not include her in it originally. She then hangs up and calls my supervisor's cell phone, cussing up a storm at her apparently and demanding to know what I thought I was doing. She defended my actions, saying given the situation she thought it was right. The human resource manager approaches me a little bit later to comfort me and even hugged me a bit and rubbed my shoulders, telling me not to worry. I did exactly what she told me to and I'm in the right, and the co-owner is just nuts. She is fully supporting me, as are the other co-workers. The human resource manager explains that the co-owner thinks she can do whatever she wants but that she's also stressed because of our company's money losses recently. Apparently, the co-owner's major argument against my actions is, if the police has not been in contact with us, then it's probable that the guy is just lying to get out of a traffic ticket. She also insisted I should mind my own business and stay out of company problems. A bit hard to do when my job is currently crossing over into everyone's company business. A bit later, our voicemail updates. It takes about an hour for recorded voicemails to get to our actual voicemail. And who is it but the state trooper who arrived at the scene, saying, "A witness exclusive of the involved parties saw one of your vans at the scene of the accident and saw him leave, so we'd like to discuss the situation with your company." This means someone besides the man that called also reported our company vehicle as being at the accident and possibly involved. And where the accident supposedly happened is apparently right down the road from our second office. So now we have two witnesses and a state trooper trying to figure out why the hell our guy left the accident and whether he was involved or not. And I'm in trouble for telling one of the involved parties who he needs to message. So I told my supervisor about the state trooper's message and wrote down, word for word, what he said in the message, his name, and his number, and gave it to her. As thanks to the co-owner, I am no longer obligating myself to try and save the company legal issues. My supervisor forwarded the information to the co-owner, who thanked her, and then told her she was going to call me and apologize for yelling at me in front of an entire office. My supervisor waited a bit, then asked me if the co-owner had called me. She had not, nor had she texted me, nor had she called my office phone. My supervisor also pointed out to some of our other co-workers that if the co-owner was so demanding of proof about the situation, all she had to do was call and go to our other office, where the company vehicles were parked in the first place, and just look at the van's front bumper. The co-owner refused to acknowledge this was even an option, apparently. So in full compliance of the co-owner's complaints, I stayed out of all office-related business for the rest of the day. Sure, I helped customers. But for most of today, I did my collections work, which is what I'm getting paid to do, not put up with things like handling every incoming call in the company that doesn't know an extension or line number. If the co-owner wants me to stay out of business, then I will. In the meantime, I'm writing down but not necessarily responding to incoming messages and phone calls that involve company business. I even went so far as to tell a potential seller with our auction company that I have no say in who sells what and they need to email our sales department because it's none of my business. Minus my usual work, I also took long computer-based breaks to fiddle around by reading the news. They have no control and no monitoring over what I do online. And if I'm to stay out of things as she wants, then I'm going to do whatever I want this week. And I'll be honest, unless it's majorly important, that's what I'm going to do until the co-owner actually does something and apologizes. I refuse to deny any law enforcement any information that can help in an investigation because I refuse to allow evidence tampering or any other sort of law-breaking refusal, especially when someone in the company may have been involved in a possible hit-and-run accident. It is not worth being put in jail or at least fined just because my mildly corrupt co-owner boss thinks I shouldn't tell police or possible victims anything. While I don't believe the situation involving our driver is as dramatic as it's being made out to be, state troopers and people involved in the accident prove at least something happened. And I wouldn't want to get involved further than I already have, nor get yelled at for complying with the law. Thanks for watching the video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please consider subscribing to the channel for more content. Let me know what you think about the stories in the comment section below. Have a great day. Bye bye.